Hello and welcome to the Monopath podcast. I am speaking with Georgina Hill-Brown today, who goes by the alias The Honest Vocal Coach, which is how we begin the podcast, really. We discuss how the name came to fruition and the intended meaning behind it. And so it only really logically follows from that we spent quite a bit of time talking about honesty, authenticity, genuinity, and their relationship to being a good person. Not only that, but being a good person's relationship to being a good creative. Obviously, it would be a bit silly if I did a podcast with a vocal coach and didn't ask any questions about what makes a good voice. And so throughout the conversation at several points, there are some useful tips for prospective singers. But given most people have the capability to use their voice in some way, I think those tips and that guidance is generally applicable to anybody. Okay, one other thing. The thing I always really say at the beginning of the podcast is if you do want to support what I'm doing here, if you're enjoying the conversations, a couple of things you can do. The first of those is you can leave a review on iTunes just to tell me what you've enjoyed. We do speak about data and how to have a healthy relationship with it and analytics. In this podcast, I don't tend to pay too much attention to it, but I do pay enough attention to make sure that these conversations keep on track and are as good as they can be, and the comments and the messages that I receive from people, including the reviews on iTunes, are fairly vital to me keeping on the right path with this podcast and making sure that it's not purely self-gratifying and that others do gain something too. The second way is to shop at Arthur Dove Tea Co, which is my tea company. Buy yourself some tea, and that really helps me to have the free time to continue having these conversations. The world is a very unusual place at the moment, and again, this is something we speak about. How much of your time should be spent doing things you wouldn't usually choose to do? The 9-to-5 job being the standard example there. Orders that I receive through the tea company actually just help me to spend less of my time that way and more of my time at home choosing to do what I want to do, such as this podcast or making new blends for the tea company, or whatever it might be. Writing new music is one of the things I'm finding I'm doing a lot more at the moment. So you can help either of those two ways, maybe some others as well. Who knows? Anyway, that's the last you need to hear from me for now. And so without further ado, I will bring you Georgina. Georgina, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how are you doing?
Fantastic. Okay, first question. Your name is on YouTube, The Honest Vocal Coach. That's quite a striking name, I think. Is there a deeper meaning to it, or where's that from?
Yeah, I think there is. Originally, when I was looking for a name for my YouTube, I often got, feedback from my subscribers saying, you're always honest and fair about people's performances, what's good, what's not. And honest kept coming up all the time. So that's kind of why it sort of was connected to me. Rather than just, Georgina Hill-Brown, didn't sound as cool on YouTube as, the Honest Vocal Coach. And it just kind of stuck. And then I thought, well, let's give it a try. And went with that, and people just recognise me as that now. I think it's just the true honesty that I give in the reactions that I do, and everything that I do. I'm always fair, always to the point, never rude, and I always like to try and finish with a bit of a positive spin.
Yeah. So maybe it's worth familiarising people who listen to this podcast with what you do.
Oh, yeah, of course. So I am a vocal coach, and I've been teaching singing now for 17 years. Originally, I was a dancer, trained up until the age of 16, went to college. My college dance teacher said that, yes, your dancing's okay, but your singing's actually better. And I was like, oh, great, okay. I spent all these years training to be a dancer, and it turns out I can sing. Who knew? Because I'd never had any training up until that point, nothing at all. And I just kind of fell into performing arts at that point because I'd not even taken it for school options, music, drama, nothing. It just kind of fell into it. And I was very much backstage to begin with. I would obviously do the dancing, singing, acting, all that. But I love gadgets. I've always been a fan of gadgetry. So I learned everything there was to know about, recording and live sound and the videos that we had to do and all of that. Oh, and stage management. I like to be a little bit bossy. So, yeah, that was what I did initially. It was only when I had kids after I'd worked at Palace Theatre in Manchester for a long time and other theatres, did the singing just keep coming back up again. And yeah, I started to coach from home, went to do a year's teaching course, all jammed into 1 year. And that's it. I just kind of flew from there.
And so now you do the Honest Vocal Coach. That's mostly on YouTube?
Yeah, I would say my exposure on YouTube is pretty big, but I'm all on all the social medias as well, Instagram and that kind of thing. And I have put a few of my own songs out, but I don't know what it is. I enjoy writing with others more than putting my own out. So I've only done literally a few singles of my own, and put it out there. So you probably find them on Spotify or wherever.
Okay, there's a lot that I could go off there. I'm trying to be strict with myself and not go off on too many tangents because I'm like a dog chasing cars sometimes. Okay, so let's stick with the honest thing. A lot of the things that you do on YouTube is reacting to other people, and you mentioned that you like to be fair to people. How do you kind of balance that with like not being judgmental? You're kind of making value judgments about people's performance, but not having that value judgment be kind of cross over into negativity or meanness. How do you kind of keep that balance of authenticity and realism?
I try and stick to the technique. That's kind of the bottom line, the technique of good singing. And a lot of pop singing is not necessarily good technique anyway. But I like to start from a technique base and then look at whichever performance it is and sort of explain this is ideal technique. This is not so much. It's more of a style choice. And it's tricky because there have been reactions that I've done where it's been so bad and I have laughed and I've apologized for that. You can't help it sometimes when you think, who let them on stage? This is craziness. But yeah, the balance is quite difficult to stick to, I must say. But I'm pretty good at it. There's just been the odd video where it's just taken over me and I'm like, what is going on? What's happening here?
Yeah, well, you're only human.
Yeah. I did a not Katy Perry, what's she called? Katy Price reaction with Peter Andre. Oh, and
was that the Aladdin one?
Yeah. I did it. I made it so that you had the autotune version against the actual version that went out on the night, and the difference was just so massive. And it sounded so much like a different person when you actually listen to her without the auto-tune. And it frustrated me more than anything. It made me chuckle, but it frustrated me because there's so many great artists out there that are looking for exposure. And because of who Katie Price is, she gets to do this Aladdin thing. And I'm shocked that she was even given an opportunity to be on Eurovision, thinking, wow, if, she sounds like this without the autotune, what would she have actually been like if she'd have got through for Eurovision and gone for us? So I think it was the more a frustration of smoke and mirrors, which is why I have a series on my channel, which is called What the Fair. And I look at things that go wrong and essentially how it could have been avoided. Because I teach a lot of youngsters and I want to show them to be genuine and have integrity and not use so much smoke and mirrors. If you can't do it live, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm going off on one here, but I try and keep the balance as best I can, but it's not always easy.
You're like a authenticity detector then as well, because that seems like the thing that frustrates you is that it's not authentic in the slightest. It's like the presentation is just so far removed from the performance that there's so much. It's not coming from Katie Price in that case, is it? It's like all of the good parts of the not really the performance. I want to kind of separate them, but all of the good things that a person likes when they hear it, or what is presented to them, are not the work of Katie Price.
Yeah.
It's the work of the production team.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you are. It just seems to me like we probably have similar values there, because I'm very put off when there's that huge distance between the performance and the presentation. And you can just, I think intuitively, most people can just recognize when there is that distance there anyway, and are put off by it too. But very few people focus on it in the way that you do, and like with the actual name of your thing being Honest Vocal Coach. I don't think I've ever seen anybody who really kind of pushes that thing for like being genuine and honest in the way that you do.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just giving you kudos here.
Thank you. I mean, there are other vocal coaches on YouTube that do a similar thing, which is great. There's a guy, Sam Johnson, and he's very analytical. He'll literally listen to a couple of seconds and he'll say, this is happening. And it's fascinating if you don't know about voice, to learn all of the sort of technicalities. But there's also vocal coaches out there who they're kind of just reactors, but they're using the Vocal Coach Reacts thing to get the views. And it's almost like, imagine watching a fireworks display and they just watch the video and go, ooh, this is nice, ooh. And that's kind of what they're doing. And I feel that that's not quite what I would picture as a vocal coach. You've got to be looking at what's bad as well as what's good, because you're not going to improve otherwise. So again, another reason why the honest sort of thing came up. And I don't know if it's why I've got, less subscribers than some of these other YouTubers that do it, because I do say the odd negative thing here and there. But I'd rather be truthful and honest than fall into the smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have this conversation a lot about being truthful and honest, and in various different avenues. I had a conversation with a potential customer this morning on the tea company who was asking about whether we made vegan products as a loose leaf tea company. And I've spoken about that before in the past on the podcast, but that still seems strange to me that some tea companies go out of their way to say it's a vegan product. It's fruit and herbs. It's like going to the greengrocer and asking if it's vegan products. Of course it is.
Yeah.
It's fruit and herbs. They're grown out. Of course they are. I mean, some tea companies do add things like marshmallows, for example, that obviously are not there for the flavour, they're there for the aesthetic, and they're not vegan. So I understand that. But as a general question, are you vegan to a tea company makes no sense at all. So I never really push the vegan thing, although I could. And I sometimes see other companies, and this is not, I'm not trying to be disrespectful by any means, but I see some companies who either say things about it being a vegan tea company, or maybe about it being organic, or any of these things, and so sometimes, not all that often, I'm just kind of struck by it seeming a little bit disingenuous and almost just trying to capitalize on a trend rather than saying it because there's actually some meaning behind it. Because, as I just said, in the tea company, there's not really any reason that you should say that.
Yeah.
It should just be a given. In the same reason you don't need to have a vegan greengrocer.
Yeah.
Of course it's vegan.
Yeah. I totally know what you say when you say about trend and what's popular, because obviously when you're building a YouTube channel like mine, you do have to do the odd video that is gonna just bring in the masses, if you like. Just like a theatre, you want bums on seats, so you put someone famous in the show so that people want to come and see that particular person. But I don't know. I don't want to sell out too much. I'll do those performances every so often, but it'll be ones that I like, rather than just doing them because it's going to get me hundreds of thousands of views, because it's not my, it's not integral, I guess.
No, I really do connect with that. I mean, even for me, when I do philosophy or when I speak on the podcast, like sometimes I say things because it's moral philosophy is what I study mostly at the moment. And so sometimes I say things because I'm just coming from it, from like an analytical, philosophical point of view, that get me into a bit of trouble because they're going against like a moral trend at the moment. But I can't not say them.
Yeah.
I can't not say what I think or what I believe to be true in some cases, or I can't help but question or be curious, because that's just who I am. And so I do get told to not talk about things and be quiet about this or be quiet about that, but it just kind of goes against really what I think is important about, I mean, this has got a bit of depth to it, I suppose, but about being a good person. I think you're supposed to be honest with yourself about who you are and just let that be expressed.
Yeah, I watch a channel on YouTube, Sunny, I think she's called, and for years she's done videos on building your social media sort of exposure, how to do this on Instagram, how to do that on Twitter, and all those things. And when she tried to do something else, she was told, oh no, you can't just do a vlog and show us who you are. You need to stick to your lane and just do this. And that's a similar kind of thing to you, really. It's like, try and say things that, or be involved in things that are going to be on trend or popular. And if you want to speak out of turn, people get very frustrated about that.
Yeah, I mean, I do the same things in philosophy that I do just with anything else. It's just in philosophy, I think it's more uncomfortable for the reasons I just mentioned. It's moral philosophy. But I'm applying the same techniques really to anything else I do. I'm quite a creative person, so when I do the tea company, the blends are a little out there and a little unusual, and nobody else does them. But they're close enough to the trends, but they're just a little bit out there. And it's the same with my music. They're close enough to whatever the current trends are, because I'm a part of that culture that provides it. But they're a little bit different. There's like the arrangement makes it a little bit different. And it's just the same with my philosophy. I'm just curious and creative with it, and it just goes where it goes. And some people just don't like it.
Yeah, because
they like it sticking to, like you said, sticking to your lane.
Yeah, stick to what you know. Don't try and do something else. Well, why not? There's more to a person than just doing a thing one way. We all need to explore ourselves. So I think watching her video, when she made the video about it, I started to do the odd vlog on my YouTube channel, because I felt that people knew me as a vocal coach, but they didn't know the background of my opinions and where it came from. So I've done a few vlogs and they seem to be going quite well, which is nice, because I thought no one really cared about me. I thought they were coming to my channel for whoever it was I was reacting to. But in the last, I would say, 20,000 subscribers, sort of the last, I'd say 6 months, it seems to have been more just people are interested a little bit more in who I am and why I want to do the videos that I do, which is lovely, because I honestly thought people come here because they're picking and choosing the videos and they'll watch it because it's Demi Lovato, for example, or whoever the singer, and they're just here for that. And I still know that, your Miley Cyrus, your Demi Lovato, Ariana, Lady Gaga, the real popular ones at the moment, they'll get the most views, but then there'll be subscribers that are subscribed for me and they'll watch everything, which is lovely. I quite like that. Makes me feel a little bit better that they're not just on my channel for the names that are there. It's actually my opinion that they care about.
Yeah, I think it's like maybe it's similar to what we already spoke about with like presentation and performance, or a personality somewhere deeper than that. Like, I would imagine, and I, running the tea company mostly through Instagram, I feel like I probably have some common thread there. But people come, I would imagine, to your YouTube for the presentation, for those singers and the big names, but they stick around for the personality, like who you are. Like, I think that's what keeps like the core listeners and the core viewers. They probably stick around. They won't stick around for clickbait, personalities, trends. They'll stick around for authenticity and a personality and whoever you are. That's what people connect to.
Yeah, and I've been learning a lot about clickbait since you just mentioned that recently, because when you do put a vlog out there, it's such a different thing to what the videos are that I already have on my channel. I didn't want to research, write titles and go clickbait option, because I look at other YouTubers like the Saucony Jolies, which everybody's heard of, a family of 4 kids and parents, and they do so many videos, so they have to think of titles that have some essence in them to get you to watch it. And it's hard because I want to do that in a way so people will get grab their attention, but I don't want to just sell out and put something there that do you know what I'm saying? I don't want to just blatantly put a title out there that just pushes somebody's buttons so that they'll watch it.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think it's, maybe you could correct me if I was wrong, but I feel like we probably have the same foresight there, or the same goals in mind. I'm never really, we spoke about it a little bit before the podcast, but I never really care too deeply about analytics and how many people are listening to it. And I just don't aim that way. My aim with the podcast, as a good example, is just to have a good conversation, because for me, it's just useful. It's useful for my understanding of art in general and creative people, and it's nice to connect to somebody else who's creative and kind of go, we have that thing in common, or yeah, creative people seem to do this thing, or they seem to do that thing. Like, that's just rewarding intrinsically. I don't need anything else. But I feel like what you're pointing at is that to do YouTube poorly or inauthentically would be to not care so much about that, and to care more about how many people are clicking through and onto your videos, like the superficial points. They would be for me. Is that about right?
Yeah. I mean, I do care to a certain extent, because I want to know, which videos people are watching, what do they like most, so I can, because from the beginning of my channel, it's kind of pivoted a bit and then pivoted again, and you learn from what you've already put out there as what works and what doesn't work. But yeah, I would probably agree with that the stats are not that important, but in a way that I do want to use them as market research as a businesswoman. If I'm just going to put out videos no one's going to watch, then there's a problem. So I need to have a bit of an idea of what's working to move forward. But this podcast conversation is exciting for me today, because I've been enjoying doing my podcast, but it's kind of happened because of my channel. Doing discussions on there have ended up as a podcast, but I haven't spent the time just making podcasts, and I'd like to do that more. And this has kind of given me a bit of a boost to yeah, of course, I have great conversations with people all the time, yet I'm not always utilizing them or putting them on a podcast. So anyway, it's just inspired me a little bit to not just think about my YouTube, to focus on the podcast as well, put things on the podcast that are not just on my channel, that are different, that's just my opinion. And I think at the moment there's so much negativity in the world. I'm a fairly positive person, so a splash of positivity in the podcast would be quite nice, I think.
Yeah, I mean, do it. The podcasts they're great, and they're pretty easy to put together. I mean, mine's not that produced. There's some bells and whistles, admittedly. There's some music on there and things like that tie the whole thing together. But it's pretty straightforward. And I really do find that the thing that people... Okay, so before we spoke about the podcast, or early on in the podcast even, we were speaking about your name, The Honest Vocal Coach, and where it came from. And you mentioned that it's because a lot of people it kept coming up in conversation that you were just honest and you were just being genuine and fair. For me, with the podcast, I seem to keep getting something maybe similar, which is that like the conversation is always just healthy and respectful, but people just enjoy listening to the conversation because it's something that they always wanted to know about, you know, a creative person that maybe they respect or admire. But the conversation in person just never feels like in the room there's the space to have it. And so that people just keep coming back and saying that time and time again, that it's like this sort of like depth into like artistry and creativity is somewhat lacking in real life. So, and it's just, I mean, podcasts seem to be the way to go for most people. Everyone's starting a podcast these days, but I think if you've already got a YouTube channel, it just the core data's already there, isn't it?
Yeah, it just made sense. You know, I'd been looking at podcasts for a long time, and I knew the technical side. I knew all of that because I've done it for many years, the microphone and the recording it on, you know, all the software and everything. But when it actually came to setting up a platform, my podcast name, and how you actually put it there to then go to all the other sites of Spotify and everything, that was a bit of a minefield. That took me a good month to learn everything. And then I found so many platforms that would be quite beneficial for me to use, where you just upload it, and then once you've set everything up, it just fires it out to all of the other platforms of, you know, Google or iTunes or Spotify or whatever, which I found invaluable. But it did take some setting up, I must say. Oh.
How open are you to exploring new ideas?
Oh, very much at the moment, because I've had to pivot my business again throughout lockdown. I would say I'm open to plenty of ideas. I mean, I've had to shut down my studio throughout this time. I got a little bit of grant help to, you know, help pay the landlord. Woo, the landlord gets it. That's great. So I could keep the space open for a length of time, but it just doesn't become feasible now to teach face-to-face singing, guitar, piano, etc., because so many people are concerned about COVID in the situation we're in now. The amount that I would have in the door for sessions is a lot less. So I transferred 80% of my teaching online, and eventually squeezed some of the face-to-face ones to online as well. And now I don't need a studio. I don't need the building anymore. I do miss standing face-to-face to someone and feeling their energy. I've really missed that because I'm quite an empath, and I love just that energy between two people, the chemistry. So I miss that side. But it's actually opened my business to so many different ideas now. Not having that worry of a building over my head, of I've got to pay this bill, and I've got to do guitar and this to make sure we earn enough money to keep the building. It's now meant that I'm a bit freer to explore other avenues. I've started to write courses now, which I'm loving. They take forever, but it's worth it in the end. I did a beginner's foundations of singing course last year. Took me a year to write it, produced all the videos, and that's still available. It did pretty well. I wouldn't say it's, you know, earning millions or anything, but it's great because it's an added extra to what I do online on YouTube. So if singers want to know a bit more, it's there. And then this year, I've been writing a course on how to become successful on YouTube. Everything that I've learned, I've put into a course to, you know, help other people as well. And that I wouldn't have had the time to do that before because I was running the studio and having all the overheads of everything else. So it's in the very, very long answer, but basically, yes, I'm looking for lots of ways to expand my business more on, you know, online than ever before.
Yeah, I think you've got to be a bit entrepreneurial to be a creative or to work in the arts anyway. It's very difficult to just pick one thing and stick with it. You've got to reach out and take every opportunity that you're presented with because that's what success looks like. Especially in the modern age, like for promoting music in the UK right now is extremely difficult because most musicians have been earning their living by performing live. And I mean, how do you do that now? I've seen people have started booking concerts again, or adapting and doing things that are streamed online and so on. But I do, that is a concern. But
Yeah,
maybe a separate concern. I think the interesting thing though, that I'd like to push a little further into is that adaptability. And I mean, have you always been like that? Do you think that's a skill that you pick up, or is that just hardwired into you?
I think it was when I went for the teaching course, after I'd worked in theatres and done the performing arts and all of that. I was doing a basic admin job. I worked for the RAC, looking after cars. I had toddlers. And when I went for that course, it just opened my eyes that I didn't have to work the 9 to 5 anymore. I didn't have to work for anybody else. I needed to have the know-how to be able to, make enough financially. An example at the studio, when it's just me teaching singing, it's not that cost effective because you got to pay for a whole building. But when you've got guitar lessons, piano lessons, a recording room, a live rehearsal room, it all adds to it. So it had to become almost entrepreneurial when I became a vocal coach, because I knew that just being a vocal coach wouldn't necessarily allow me to have a nice roof over my head. And I didn't want to be forever the vocal coach teaching from the back of a house type thing. I wanted, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just wanted to level up. But yeah, I think it's definitely the teaching course and the realization that you don't have to be 9 to 5. You can have a great life and earn money in different ways. You just have to get the know-how and just be prepared to keep learning. Because some people aren't. They think the end of school, that's it. I've done my training, I've done my learning, and I'll just get a job and that's it. But not me. I've always wanted to keep learning about more things. At the moment, I have an action coach. It's based in Castleford. It's a company that helps businesses grow. It's very much about analytics and the money stuff that I'm not very good at, profit and loss and all of that. That's just like... I can't do the money side. That just beats me a little bit. I failed badly at maths in school. But they give me sort of a bit of mentoring and a bit of pushing, because I know what I want to achieve, but sometimes I kind of fall off and end up doing something else. And that it just keeps me focused. So every 2 weeks, I have this coach who goes, right, well, you've done this, have you done that? And we'll talk things through, and it's just been valuable. But anyway, again, a long answer to your question. I think it was that teaching, also with other musicians, because the course was for adults. It wasn't for kids just out of school. It was called the Music Facilitator Program. So it was for any musician of singing, piano, guitar, whatever musician instrument that they had, to learn how to teach it and also learn how to build a business around it, so you could bring in the income yourself or get a job with the music service or whatever. And I think the other people on the course, we just vibed off each other so much. And there's some incredible people, jazz drummer who I'll never forget, Michael, and there was a bass guitarist who had played with everyone. He'd never taught before, so he just wanted to learn a few skills, but all of them had that kind of mindset that if I want it, I'm going to have to do it myself.
Yeah, that's me and my fiance Dee. We talk about this all the time. We're just ruthlessly independent, I think. Like, I know that I can't just... I'm not in a vacuum. I'm not on my own. But I act as if I am when it comes to things like income. Like, I want to try and make it so that I'm independent. Like, I don't want to have to rely on somebody else, which is one of the funny myths that my era was brought up in, that it's 9 to 5 is a secure and stable income. It's been horrifically proved wrong in recent times.
Yeah.
So I just, it's funny, in the last podcast I recorded was with a friend of mine, Richard Swift, and he's a music teacher at Wakefield College. And we said something very similar. If you're going to do something, you aren't going to get security anywhere. So you may as well do something you want to do. You may as well do something that you like to do.
Absolutely, yeah. That was one of the things that drove me from RAC. Getting basically what I did was, as fleet cars were involved in accidents, I helped whoever driver get a new car while theirs got repaired, and would make sure it was fixed and went back to them. And it was super cushy. I earned loads of money doing it. And my kids were, if they were ill or whatever, they'd let me go and sort them out and leave work at the drop of a hat and everything. But it wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. It wasn't what made me light up and want to, get up in the morning. And I just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I'd rather earn a lot less but do something that I love. The money wasn't a drive for me. It was more having something that I enjoyed doing. Yeah,
I try to earn enough. I kind of work out. I mean, I am quite good with numbers, and I'm quite good with money. So I just work out how much I need to eat and live, and earn that much. And that kind of keeps me on the edge of knowing that I have to keep pushing with the tea company, all these other side things, because I'm just getting enough. I'm not getting anything extra to provide for luxuries or anything like that. I'm just getting enough to live the kind of way that I'm comfortable living in. But I still feel like, okay, if I want more, I have to do more of the other things. It's not to go for the secure, this mythological, secure and stable job. I just don't. I don't aim for that.
I don't think it exists anymore. You get a job for life. That's not a thing.
Absolutely not. I mean, actually, one thing you said very early on the podcast, and I'd kind of made a mental note of it, was that you didn't come to music really, or singing, until quite late on.
Yeah.
So I think you was in your kind of like mid to late teens when you did that. This is another one of those themes that I get with creative people, and it's something that resonates with me as well. I didn't pick up a musical instrument until I was 16, and I always thought that was quite late. I always thought that most people who stick with the arts are people who have been doing it since they were 5 years old. But it just doesn't seem to be the case.
No, in my sort of experience more recently, I teach a lot of dancers that want to go to musical theatre college and, become dancers and all of that. But there's a huge percentage that get fed up when they get to 16 and they just quit doing it and then do something completely different. That dance from the age of like 4, and they do it for so long, and then that's it. It's done. They're going to do something else. It's a much smaller percentage that want to then go off and continue studying. It's a fascinating thing.
I hardly know. I mean, my brother, who's been on the podcast before, is an actor, and he's wanted to do that since he was young. And I always thought that's what a creative person who, like, they just know from very early on, they've been practicing from very early on. But practically, I mean, it's such a large majority of people who I speak to just seem to be creative people. And the actual way it manifests is fairly arbitrary. It's anything. It's a musical instrument. It's dance. And they just go off and start it whenever they like.
Yeah.
I think it's the mindset behind it. There's some kind of attitude or disposition behind or underneath the instruments that you pick up or the field that you end up working in that's more important.
Yeah. I do think your upbringing as well and your parents' outlook on creativity as well can make a difference. For example, my dad was like my biggest fan with my singing. But from my mum's point of view, singing wasn't a proper job. Being a performer wasn't a proper job. That was their generation. She wanted me to be a teacher, which is crackers, really, because that's kind of where I've ended up, like full circle. But from their generation. So they never really pushed it that much when I was little. The dance side of things, it was me who said I want to do a bit of dancing. And with the singing, it was me who pushed it when I realised that, actually I can sing a bit here. And then I joined some amateur operatic societies, and my mum and dad, they didn't know anything. They were like, where are we taking you? Well, it's this amateur thing, and I get to sing and wear costumes and stuff. I want to go and try that. So I think it does make a difference to you whether your parents have a background in it or knowledge of it, as to how much they're going to push you as well.
Yeah, my parents weren't pushy with the arts whatsoever. I think they're still very traditional in that sense. Like when I told them I was going back to university to study philosophy, they asked me what for.
Yeah, they're
What's
like,
the point?
you're an adult now. Why are you going back to school?
Yeah, I mean, mind you, they did say the same thing when I went to do music college as well, because in both instances I had zero experience in music. I didn't have any, I couldn't read music. I just went and learnt it though. And same with philosophy. I didn't have any experience of doing philosophy, but I just went and learnt it and signed up. And I think they always anticipated there would be some precognition and some end goal in mind. But it was never that. It was just, I'm just doing it for its own sake. It just seems like this is something I need.
Yeah, it does seem like we have a disposition, almost something that's in us that makes us want to do creative things and go and do it for ourselves. Saying that my mum used to say when I was young was life is what you make it. And I always, thought of that. And she was always right in that sense. If I wanted something, I'd have to go and make it happen. Nothing would ever fall in my lap. So when I got a bit excited about creative things, I pushed for it. It wasn't really anybody else that pushed me along.
Yeah. I said, do you do the same sort of thing then for your family or for students? Do you know, to kind of cultivate this creative environment? I imagine you must take that responsibility fairly seriously.
Yeah, I've got a lot of youngsters that I teach, mainly that are sort of musical theatre orientated. But the adults that I work with, they just want to explore what the capabilities are and enjoy music as well. But yeah, I think so.
Is it with I mean, what does that look like? How you kind of? I think I'd imagine you would. I suppose the question I want to ask is about, maybe it's a bit more personal, and feel free to sidestep it if you prefer. But it is about like how are you raising your kids differently in that sense? Like, what have you learned from your own experience growing up, and what do you do differently to kind of cultivate that?
I think
Artistry and
for me, it was lead by example always with the kids. And I've always been a very, very hard worker. And there's probably times when I was building the studio that's just closing, in fact, where I was working a lot more of the time to try and build a business and not spending as much time with my kids. But I'm hoping, I know my eldest daughter said this, that she found that quite inspiring, that to build a business, you've got to put the time and you've got to work hard. And she didn't really feel that she missed out on anything, because there were, a number of years where I was stretching myself quite thinly, trying to do everything. Plus, they had a great childhood, my kids. If they ever say otherwise, I will, be saying what for, because I judged competitions when they were little, from the age of about, I'd say Ellie was about 6 maybe to 14. And because of 2 daughters, one's 21, one's 18. And I used to judge talent competitions, and we'd literally go to a different city every weekend. I was chairman of the judges. I would, judge the singing that day. We would have a dance teacher that was doing that and the drama, and it was fantastic. And they met so many people. They met, Jade, who's gone on to be in Little Mix. They met George Sampson, who did Britain's Got Talent. So they had a great childhood, even though we were like away every weekend and it was essentially me working. They loved it because they got a little mini photo shoot every time they went, because there was a photographer there. So I think it was a nice way of showing them the creative industry. And I never forced either of them to sing, ever. It was only when they got a little bit older that they want to have a go. And both of them have been in girl bands. One of them still sings, but it's very rare now. She's trying to adult right now, got her own place. Making, like you're saying, making sure she's got enough money to spend on bills and everything else. Where the other one's just finished new college, and she's a bit like, which direction am I going to go now? And she's not a singer now. But I hope that I inspired them that you got to work hard at everything that you do. You can't just play at it. If you want to, make a difference to people, and build a business or, just know that you're a good person, you have to put the time in.
Absolutely. You have to do it. That's it's all very, I think it's all well and good thinking about and having ideas about this business or that business or this pursuit or what I'm going to do. But you just have to make it happen. You have to make it a reality. It's like sometimes people do ask me, like, how are you doing so much, or how are you doing the tea company or whatever it might be, or the podcast. It doesn't really matter what it is. But it's like, I just decided one day after thinking about it for a while that I wanted to do it. And so I just did it. I just started doing it. And it was maybe in some cases not very good when I started doing it. But do you know what? That's okay. That's fine.
Yeah, it totally is okay. My first videos on YouTube were literally me just with a phone. And then I had to learn and get better at it and sort of leveled up on the way. But yeah, if I was going into tea, I wouldn't have no idea.
Yeah, well, people judge you by the end product as well. So people they don't see the process behind building any company or making a YouTube video or developing a podcast. People just judge it on that end result and just think that's all there is to it. I mean, and everybody, like, I do it. I'm sure you do it. Like, if I go to a YouTube search, like how to do this thing or something like that, I judge it by what the thumbnail of the video looks like and the first 5 seconds of the video. If I've never heard of them before, that's just what I do. And if that's glossy and overproduced, I don't think about the 10 years of painstaking, painful and unpaid labor that's gone into that. You don't see it. You just see the end result. You just see that kind of static moment in time instead. And it's another one of those misconceptions about the arts and creativity.
Yeah. I think that's why the reality TV shows come up a lot in conversation with me anyway, where people seem to think that they can go on a TV show and then they're famous and then everything's wonderful. And that's really not how it is. It's in you when it's part of who you are. And the ones that have a background in music or singing or whatever, then go on to the X Factors or the reality TV shows. They're the ones that are going to make the most out of it and will continue to be good at what they do. The ones that just think, just going to dip into this, I'm going to do maybe a couple of singing lessons, rock up to Britain's Got Talent, and I'm going to be famous. That is so not how it works.
Yeah, I think, people expect this kind of, it to be that this propulsion to out of the stratosphere in just 0 to 60, but it doesn't happen. It's funny, I was talking about the difference between some TV shows like Britain's Got Talent and the X Factor compared to something like The Voice, and we were talking about how on The Voice it doesn't seem like you ever see the names of like successful contestants like in the public eye as much as you do the Britain's Got Talent. And I was saying I think that's probably a good thing though, because they're just being given something more honest.
Yes. Yeah, I never really thought of it like that. But we do as humans think, well, that person that won it, what happened to them? Why are they spending all this time preparing for The Voice when they don't get anywhere afterwards? I'm sure they do.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just see it as The Voice. I mean, I don't watch any of these shows, so I'm going from very little information on any of them. But it seems to me that The Voice is just there to kind of give people support. We'll give you mentorship. We'll give you, some privileges that you wouldn't have otherwise because you won this show. Giving people the record label deal, which is not even really that you get on X Factor. That's kind of buying into this illusion about creativity that success can be achieved without effort.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the reasons I'm glad that, X Factor's ended now. I know Psycho Music closed this year. I think.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, it was last month. I was a bit shocked. I was like, what? Wrote to all its very few people that were left on the label and said, we're closing. So Psycho is no more. There is no record label anymore, which is kind of exciting because it was predominantly just there to push the winners of your X Factor and that kind of thing. And you can only go so far. in a certain mold. Being creative means that you're going to change the way you do things. You might try a different genre. You might want to explore music. That's what creatives do. So that's why it would never work long term being signed to a record label like Psycho, because they just want to tune the same stuff out and do what's popular. They're not necessarily going to allow you to explore your horizons.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's almost like a relic of an old tradition. It's like how record labels wish it still was, but in reality hasn't been for quite some time. It's a similar thing to how to adapt to a world where digital streaming is such a prevalent part of most music consumers' experience of music is through digital streaming. How does the music industry adapt to that? And in most cases, it seems like it just doesn't. It's just desperately trying to cling on to, please buy my record.
Yeah, it really is trying to hang on to those old times. And there are people I've worked with that still think that you can go and do a gig and a record exec will turn up and go, here, have lots of money. It's so not how it works. It's really not. You pretty much do the entire thing on your own now. I found out recently that Amber Riley, just as an example, she was in Glee and she did, what's this? Dream Girl. She was like the lead in that. And she's wanted to put out her own music, but no record labels were particularly interested. So she was like, whatever, I'll just do it myself. And she's doing really well on her own. You don't need the labels so much anymore. You still need to have the know-how of getting it on the platforms and how to push it. But you don't need that massive record label anymore.
Yeah, I think it's almost, I mean, I've said this for a few years, and at the moment in the culture, it seems like a lot of people are quite obsessed about power and its misuse. But I think with the potential, we have the potential to kind of make the most of the things that we have, like YouTube and all of these different kinds of tools, like being able to afford a recording studio in your own home, for example. Any of these things, that they're quite empowering, and it's almost like there's a cultural renaissance going on that nobody's paying any close attention to. But I feel like I literally could do anything if I had the right motivation to do it. If I wanted to be, I don't know, a dancer, I could just go do that. I could go onto YouTube. I could learn everything I ever wanted to know. There's books, there's teachers all online. It's like, that to me seems like that's quite empowering, because like you say, I don't need a big authority to do anything. I just need the motivation aimed in the right direction.
And that motivation is key. Absolutely.
I just, I feel I'm probably not, I probably would be described as a positive person, but I don't think of myself as a positive person. I'm not negative either. I try to be a realist, and I try to shape everything so that there is something positive or fair to take about it. I think that's kind of like you as well. So when I'm looking at the world as it is now, it's like there's a lot of problems, and it's like this has been a tricky year for a number of obvious reasons, but there's so much that you can make from the situation if you're just kind of tuned into and open to doing it. I think there's so much that you can do. There's so many options available, and it really is so easy now to, I mean, I can only really talk about music, but it's so easy to make a record in your bedroom.
It really is.
You can do that.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying that before, that, the financial layout now to get a studio together in your own home it's not out of this world like it used to be. And you can jump onto YouTube and learn how to use editing software, learn how to do certain things, and you can do it. You got to put the motivation, obviously, but you can do all of it from home now. I
feel incredibly grateful for that. Like, how lucky we must be, like, to be born now. And I sometimes feel like I'm alone in thinking it. I'm clearly not. But if you were to judge it by social media, you would think that nobody thought that. But I think a lot of people, like, we are so lucky to be born, especially in this country, with the privileges that we have. Like, I almost feel guilty if I don't do something with them.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I have an obligation to make the most of it and do all of these kind of creative, oddball things that I end up doing at some point. Like, I have to do them. like I owe it to myself and to the opportunities that are available to take them.
Yeah, it is easy to fall into the sadness, though. I'm not saying I'm depressed or anything like that, but with everything that's going on in the world, when you watch the media and you're in lockdown and all these things are happening, and then there's what was going on in America, it can quite easily, if you let it take over, and your motivation could be gone to do anything. But I think for me, I just know that I can do better. A better day will, so probably sounds a bit spiritual, but a better day will come.
No, well, this is the place for spiritual and a bit of depth. That's kind of what I'm going for.
Yeah.
Let's change topic a little bit, because it is something I really did want to speak to you about, and it seems obvious to talk about it. We've missed it so far, and we're quite far in. But it is about singing and vocals. Like, what is it that makes a good singing voice?
Two things. To be a great singer, you need emotional quality and you need a knowledge of technique. If you have too much emotion, it's sloppy and it's not going to be as good. If you've got too much technical side to it, it's boring. You could sing amazing riffs and, show off your voice as much as you want, but without any connection to the song you're singing, you just, There's these two things, and you have to have both of them. Even if you're not great at the technical side, as long as you've got some technical ability, you can bring that together and be a good singer.
Is there somebody who springs to mind that people would know? Or even if they're people who they wouldn't yet know of a good voice?
I really like... what's his name? Keen, lead singer. I think his voice is very pure. It's not technically amazing, but you feel it every time he sings. And there's many other singers that I follow in that way. Your Kate Bushes, Tori Amos, singer-songwriters that it's not always perfect, but it doesn't matter because the integrity is there.
Yeah, I know you mentioned Christina Aguilera earlier as well, and there's that story. I don't think it's apocryphal, but I'm pretty sure it's true, of when she recorded Beautiful and they just used the first take.
Yeah, because she, at a point in her career there, she wanted perfection on everything, and she would re-record, take after take for days until she got absolute perfection. But what is perfection? I think it's your personal opinion on perfection. And I think it was one of the guys she was working with, maybe the producer, he said, there is beauty in the imperfections. There is a genuine, raw, emotional quality that you can only put through in those mistakes. So try not to be absolutely technically spot on, because it won't have the two things and it won't knit them together.
I think perfection is inherently dishonest. I think it is. It's just not, you can't be that. So if you're trying to make a record, for example, with like Christina Aguilera, to make it perfect is inherently dishonest, because there is no such thing as a performance that is inherently perfect. There's always these kind of artifacts in the vocal, or the changes in emotion in certain phrasings or whatever it might be, that make it imperfect, and that is the thing that makes one able to connect to it, I think.
Yeah, I think that's where I've been enjoying artists like Dodie Clark recently, and Birdie, people like that, who they'll record the piano, but you will hear the actual, the actual key. You'll hear the sound of it going up and down. You'll hear the sound of the strings. All of those things, which is its integrity and it's raw. Whereas in the studio, often we polish things to a point where it's just too produced, and you lose all of that. And I love the fact
sometimes you need to hear like the room that it's in as well.
Yeah, it's a song is a moment in time. So why polish it to a point where that moment is lost?
Yeah, it's hard to get right. So like most of my music that I release now is very polished, but with the vocal, like we and to a degree, a lot of the other stuff as well, we try to add sloppiness elsewhere. So like with the vocal, it's like the timing is not tightened up. We leave it quite like off the beat sometimes intentionally. It just sounds. I mean, I remember when I put out my first single, Little Picture, which was like 3 years ago. I'd sent it around to a few friends to just see what they thought, like people who I respected, and one of them was like, "Yeah, I think I would have time locked this. I would have time mapped it all out and put this on the beat and this, so it's really tight." And I still think now it's just but that just does feel too dishonest. It feels too unreal. That it's that. I don't know if you've heard the phrase "uncanny valley" before, but they use it in artificial intelligence, animation, stuff like that, to describe when in animation or artificial intelligence, when you see something that looks like humanoid, but then there's something there that just is like unusual or disconcerting because it's like, that's not real. I can tell it's not real in some way. It's doing all of the right things, but there's something that's offsetting me here. And I feel like that with the music as well. If it's too perfect, it's in the uncanny valley and it just doesn't feel real.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what I look at with vocals on my YouTube channel. That's why I never reacted to brand new singles. The video when it came out, my channel for the first so many years was all about live vocals that were coming from a raw place. And I often debate it on my channel. Are they using tuning? Are they using this? Are they using that? Because too much of it takes away all of the emotion, I think. So too much polish can destroy what you're setting out to do.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's just, that's something that's kind of undergirded everything we've spoke about. Is like, earlier on it was the data, and it's like you can use data, but you've got to have a healthy relationship to the data. You can't overuse it. You can't obsess about it. And with the voice, you should use technique, but you can't just be technical, because that's an unhealthy relationship with technique.
Yeah, it's all
or with emotion or whatever.
Yeah, it's all about balance, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And getting that, I don't know how people do it, because I don't think any of it's conscious. I don't think many people are just going, okay, I'm being too technical here, or I'm being too emotional. But there is just kind of this feeling that leads you down the right way towards balance, almost like walking on a tightrope.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, getting that right is not easy.
Yeah, and me walking on a tightrope, no. No. Maybe when I was a teenager and I was a dancer, I could probably keep balance, but if you put me on one now, no.
But metaphorically, with your voice, I would presume that you can.
Yes. Yeah, I think sometimes I go more for the technique than the emotional side, and I've realised that when I'm doing, my own covers on my channel. But I think because, I often, that's what my channel is, talking about vocal technique, I forget to get lost in the song and feel it. So that's one of my downfalls at the moment, is make it too technical and lacks that connection. So I'm still working on it.
Yeah, when you listen to music in general, is that what you hear? Do you hear voice first or words, or do you hear like the song or an instrument or a melody or
I'd say
something
it's
else?
Voice and melody first. Then I'll start listening to what the lyrics actually are. And then I'll listen to the orchestration, what sounds have they used.
Yeah, I don't recall which of your videos I was watching, but there was one, I think it must have been a recent one. I think it was actually the Miley Cyrus one that I watched recently with her. And it seemed like you could almost see that transition that you've just said. It was like you could hear the melody first, and then you started trying to interpret what the meaning of the words was.
Yeah.
I feel a little different there. When I'm writing music and when I'm listening to music, it's largely the same. The words themselves and the meaning that they're coupled with I don't really connect with it at all. Unless I really love the song, and I have to really be conscious and go out of my way to go, what words are they actually saying there? For me, it's just all to do with like, the Greeks use this word euphonics, which is just like the sound of it, like the sweetness of the sound. And so when I hear a vocal melody, for example, it may as well be a guitar melody or a piano melody. It's just got more character in it. There's something more human in it. But the words themselves and what they mean, they could be gobbledygook for all I cared. Are we different on that at all?
I think, yeah, because I'm listening for the vocal quality first, then I'll sort of go for the melody afterwards. Where I think for you, it's melody first, and it doesn't necessarily. It's not a voice necessarily. It might be, you know, the guitar or whatever sound. Melody is king maybe for you, whereas voice is king for me.
Yeah, it's not even melody. It's kind of shape, I think, is how I think about it. So a good writing music is easy to explain what I mean there. When I'm writing a song, it'll always start with something. It might be a melody, a very rough melody, or it might be just a tone or something like that. But when I get to making the vocals, I'm not saying words. There's no words for sometimes years. Like when I'm doing the demos, it's just kind of mouth sounds.
Yes.
Like, they're almost like half words, and they've got a similarity to words, but it's almost as if somebody from a foreign language is trying to speak them, or an alien is like, or a computer has kind of garbled all of the words and just spat out some bits and pieces in a random arrangement. And that's kind of how I hear music. I just kind of hear it, and it's I just the meanings and it just doesn't I'm just not in connection with it at all. It's purely like felt.
Yeah, no, I agree. When I'm writing music, it's a very similar thing, that I'll have the melody and I'll have some word ideas, but as I'm kind of listening to it in my head, they're not a proper structured word and a narrative as such. They're like almost vowel sounds. And it is about the sound, the overall feel of it initially, before I then get some real structured words that mean something within it.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I'll have a phrase, and that will land in the song.
Yeah.
It'll start off with like these mouth sounds and just empty shapes, and then certain words will start poking through and just feeling as if they kind of fit, almost as if it's like a jigsaw piece being put into place. It'll connect in some way that I'm like, okay, this works. Then I might get a sentence, and in many of my songs, I'll just have a sentence. Like I'll have a chorus and nothing else for seems like forever, because I'm quite slow at songwriting, or I always have been. I mean, I'm trying really hard to work on lyric writing and get better at it and kind of improve my process, which I'm kind of getting there with it. But yeah, I really have to labor over it after that stage. After having like a sentence, I have to really work at the lyrics and getting them. It's almost as if I've used the words before about finding and making, and it's like people perceive songwriting as a process that entails making something, but I think of it as finding something. So I'm just kind of blindly going into this process trying to find what it means. And when I get to the lyrics, that's the benefit of studying philosophy, is it's made it easier for me to find it.
Yeah, a friend of mine who's a songwriter, he says that the words are all in the sky. Sounds proper, like woo. He says
No, that I'll probably love this then.
He says all the words are in the sky. They're already out there. The concepts, the ideas for the songs, they're already out there. And he is like not a magician, but he picks them out and goes, I'm going to have a bit of that and a bit of that. Almost like it's already there. And that's how he puts songs together. He's a finder of song rather than does that make sense?
It does. It makes complete
Sounds
sense.
a bit woo, I know, but he says that it's all out there. You just got to pick the bits you need when you need them.
Well, woo in this context will fit finely into this podcast, and my listeners will probably appreciate it. I mean, these are the sorts of things I'm enjoying most and getting the most out of, when it's kind of like peering into somebody's mind a little bit. And most people's mental experience isn't in words, it's non-verbal, and it is kind of like felt, and it appears in colours and shapes and abstract images and geometric shapes or whatever it might be. But those are the things that I find really interesting.
Yeah, I've never really thought of it so much, but I think I'm very similar in that I'm very driven by imagery and how it feels. And I think most creatives are.
Yeah, after doing this podcast for a little while now. I forget which number I'm onto here, but it's probably approaching about 20 hours of speaking to people about creativity, which is enough. I'm getting the feeling that is the case. Most of it's just intuitive, and it is almost kind of like wading through muddy water or kind of stumbling your way through a dark room. Like that's what the process seems like to most people.
And you mentioned that you have, done 20 hours of podcasts. That's a lot of different types of people to have conversations with. Who would you say was the most fascinating and said the most, many things that you were like, every time? They kind of blew your mind.
It's really hard to pick. There's been quite an array of different fields that I've spoken with. So candle makers, perfumers, artists, visual artists and concept artists, animators, painters. So there's quite a lot of variety there. So it's I do find it very difficult to pick out because my experiences are primarily focused on music. That's what I know. And so when I'm speaking to somebody with music, I feel like perhaps I have better questions to ask. I don't really know. Or they can go a little deeper because that's my background. And so somebody who can really analyze those things. So I did speak to one of my friends, Rick Neal, who was my music tutor at college. And he's somebody who's very analytical. So he's spent a lot of time thinking about what his process is like. So he knows how to explain it to other people, and he's an excellent teacher as well. So I took a lot out of that because I am musical and somebody else was putting it into terms that I'm trying to do on the podcast anyway. But then all of the other podcasts with people in different fields, like speaking to candle makers, which I know zero about or knew zero about, is just rewarding in a very different kind of way because it's all new to me. And making the connections between those different things is probably where I enjoy it the most because there is such a large overlap, and it does seem like these are all just superficial details. The fact that somebody does candle making and another plays guitar is superficial. Like the disposition that gets you there seems the same.
I was just going to say, so what do you think the main similarity is between, everybody that you've spoken to? But that seems to be it. Their outlook and what their motivation to want to achieve something seems to be on the same level.
It's something like that. I mean, honestly, it's to answer the question about what are the themes of a creative person seems to me like it's a book length answer. It's a long answer. There's a lot there, but they are gradually becoming more apparent to me. You can just see a lot of these themes. People are curious. The people I've spoken about are more curious. They're more open to novelty and open to new ideas because of that curiosity, I think. And I think when I'm talking about myths, like there doesn't seem to be any consistency between having parents say that are creative or not. It doesn't seem to be relevant at all. It just seems that it's about you. And so it doesn't really seem to make a difference, like the nature-nurture thing doesn't seem to make any real difference. It's just you can be born, you're born away. You're given a set of skills, and it just does not matter if your parents say you're not doing that. If you are born that way, you will do it anyway.
Yes, yeah.
And then, to be honest, there's probably a bunch of other things as well. I mean, when people use the word talent, I think they're just describing that disposition. But curiosity and motivation and the eagerness to do it, they're all the things that kind of makes this creative person. But everyone I've spoken to has got a different balance of those different things. I mean, because being conscientious is a part of that as well. So, like, I speak to some creative people who are very diligent and hardworking, like ruthlessly hardworking, like they never stop, like how you were describing yourself earlier. And others who aren't. They're quite happy to just create whenever they feel like it, and that's enough.
Yeah. A friend of mine is just like that. Singer-songwriter. He's very raw with his music. He doesn't want to be over-polished. And that he'll go months without doing anything at all. And then he'll just go, I'm just going to do a bit now. It seems to be that he needs to be inspired by something to get him going. And then it'll run for a while. And then he'll stop. And then he'll come back to it. But it doesn't mean he's not a creative and he's not being successful. He's just doing it as and when.
Yeah. Well, so another thing that people who are creative seem to struggle with, and maybe this is just people in general, but in the sense of creative output, it's when is a better question than what or how. So what I mean by that is that knowing when to push on, say, writing a song and when to take a break from it, that's the skill that really matters. Like knowing when to pursue, say in my case, philosophy and doing a master's in philosophy, or when to stop. If I'm writing an essay on philosophy, knowing when to stop writing and when to look at the piano, like that is the skill that matters. And that's the one that is the hardest to get right. And when people are getting it wrong, they use words like writer's block. Or they just say like they lack inspiration or they're just not feeling it. But that it was really just failing to answer the question of when, I think. And that's a skill. That is really, I think, the skill to master. But people don't know that it's the skill to master. So they kind of end up answering the wrong question. And they think that if I go, what I need to do is just carry on doing the same thing.
Maybe I'm in the same boat as that then. Because, I've not written that much. But I do. It is when. It tends to be a part in my life, a position. I don't know what the word is, but I'll come to a place in my life and a chapter where there's the inspiration to write it down, and that's the right time to do it. And then there may be months where I get no inspiration, or what I do have is it doesn't drive me enough to want to do something with it. And it doesn't mean I'm a failure because I'm wasting that in-between time. It's just not the right time.
Yeah, I think, well, you are like everybody else then. We're just sharing these same problems because it's not as if when is always the same either. Like when is just relevant to your position in space and time, if that makes sense. So today when I'm supposed to break off from having a conversation with somebody may be different tomorrow. I may be able to handle a 10-hour conversation today and 1 hour in the next day. You've just got to be in tune with yourself, I think, and to be able to spot the signs of like, okay, what does it look like when I'm not feeling it anymore? And what am I doing when I get it back?
Yes. Yeah.
So I do. And a lot of people I've spoken to like have this problem, but a lot of them have workarounds and ways of dealing with it. And so like, this is part of what I want to do with the podcast is just to kind of build up this collection of navigation tools, I suppose, in a way. Like how can people become the best of themselves? How can people be creative when they want to be creative, and how do they do it? And like I've gone through my own personal journey with that. And again, before the podcast, you asked me, or maybe it was just earlier on in the podcast, I kind of blurred the lines there a little bit. But you asked me which is the priority for me, or which is the one that I want to work. Is it the tea company? Is it philosophy? Is it music? And really, all of those are answers to the question of when. I was just doing music and I was just hitting dead walls. And so philosophy is a perfect break from music because I feel like I'm using a completely different part of my brain that gets tired in a completely different way. And I can feel the difference of being tired with music and being tired with philosophy work. And there's another difference again with the tea company and what I do when I'm working at Lush or when I'm doing the podcast, like speaking to somebody else, like how I feel tired after speaking to somebody feels very different to how I feel tired when I've been singing for 10 hours, like making a record, or after writing an essay for 2 to 3 hours or reading philosophy stuff. Like the feeling of being tired or the feeling of getting into it is just different.
It is. Yeah, I get that.
So there's some of my thoughts. I think I probably went around the houses a little bit there as well, but I'm still struggling with it myself. I do want to write it all down at some point and try and collate some of the things I've learned from however many hours of podcasting I've done. And
maybe there's a book
experiences.
coming.
Yeah, I've always said that'd be something to do, but I wouldn't want to write something that's just pointless. And I want to actually have the expertise to write it.
Yeah, so maybe it's not time yet.
Possibly. It's getting there. I'm on my dissertation for my last year of university at the moment, so I think that'll probably occupy plenty of my writing time, but that is definitely tilting towards a book on creativity, I think, in the future. But we'll see. Okay, so we've been going for a little over an hour now. So I guess we've probably come to an end. There was just one little thing, I suppose, and this is kind of like the lightning round question, but feel free to go into as much or as little depth as you like.
Okay.
We already kind of asked about what makes a good voice, but on the flip side of that, what are the easy problems, or what are the common problems that should be avoided to make sure your voice is good?
Food is a big one. People don't really realize how much food can affect their voice. And the speed of their development when they want to improve. For example, your cheese and butter and things, dairy products like that have natural fats in them, which does coat the vocal folds and make them a bit. So you're almost having sticky vocal folds, and to train that and work with those, it's much harder. It's like having a sticky oil in an engine of the car. It's not going to run as well. So what you eat really matters, and how you look after your physical being really matters for singers. How much water are you supposed to drink? What are you not supposed to drink? And I think that's often forgotten. So I always like to pinpoint that with everybody I work with. You're the instrument, so what is going into the instrument, you should be aware of that. You don't have to be completely obsessive like your Celine Dion types who, eat nothing of dairy, eat nothing of certain things, cheese and pizza and all the rest of it. She doesn't touch any of that stuff. But if you do really want to make a go of being a singer, being aware of your own health and what's going into your body is quite important.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I'm a bit of a health nut, I suppose. I take it really seriously. I mean, I would add to that and say sleep. Like, if you want to be a good singer, sleep.
Yes.
Like, if you want to be a good anything, sleep. Like, including being a good person, sleep. Get the appropriate amount of sleep, which is not under 6 hours. It is more than that. But if you don't do that, everything else will fall to pieces. Like, that is the thing. If you're going to pick anything to get right, get that right. So yeah, that's. I think that draws us to a nice, neat conclusion there. Where can people find you online?
Well, the main place to find me is the YouTube channel, The Honest Vocal Coach. I have a website, thehonestvocalcoach.co.uk, but I'm on all other Instagram and Twitter and that kind of thing. But my main work, camera's falling down, there we go. But my main work is on YouTube at the moment.
Nice, I'll pop that in the links. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you as well, and catching up after many, many years.
Yeah, it's definitely opened my eyes on the podcast now. What else could I be doing? So yeah.
Happy to help in that case. Let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Well, have a fabulous day. Thank you again for involving me.